Hello, genealogists. This is Craig, and today we're going to talk about Genealogy Standards number 40, Evidence Mining, and 41, Evidence Scope. And as always, I will caveat our discussion with I do not represent the Board for Certification of Genealogists. I just happen to be a certified genealogist. So what we're dealing with is just my opinion and not the opinion of the Board for Certification of Genealogists. So, evidence mining number 40. Genealogists obtain evidence from information items and sets of information items. They seek evidence items that answer research questions directly, indirectly, or negatively. Evidence mining requires attention to detail, including details that might initially seem insignificant. Genealogists ignore no potentially useful evidence, including indirect and negative evidence, or evidence that might conflict with or complicate a working hypothesis. And they give equal attention to direct, indirect, and negative evidence. See glossary for definition of conflicting evidence, direct evidence, evidence, hypothesis, indirect evidence, information, negative evidence, and research question. It's probably the longest list of glossary terms in quite a while. So here in this second series of stuff on standards for researching, reasoning from evidence, we deal with the issue of you have to pay attention to all of it. And I think the number one reason why you have to pay attention to all of it is if you don't, it will come back and it will bite you. So you may find negative evidence or evidence that might conflict with the direction you're going. You got to take care of it. And in fact, that's part of the standard, the proof standard. You have to take care of that conflicting evidence. Know that if you ignore it, it will come back and bite you. One of the difficulties as a genealogist that you're going to have to deal with is that you have to know what kind of records exist. You have to know where those records are. You can't just willy-nilly seek evidence. A lot of that comes with experience. So it's important to get into where information comes from. And I imagine paying attention to me on my YouTube channel is one of the ways that you do that, because hopefully sometimes I bring you things you've never heard of before. I'm not too sure about they give equal attention to direct, indirect, or negative evidence so much as what that actually means. And what that means is none of them is more important than the other. And it means that you have to pay attention to direct, indirect, and negative evidence, and don't ignore any of it. None of it is special, I guess it would be the best way to look at it. So the second one we're going to deal with today is standard number 41, which, by the way, means that we're now halfway through the standards. And that's evidence scope. Genealogists obtain much of their evidence from information naming people of interest and their possible relatives, neighbors, and associates. Genealogists also obtain useful evidence from sources that do not name these people. These include histories of the area, its population, and relevant time periods, and works describing customs, governance, laws, and regulations. See glossary for definitions of evidence and information. If you go back and look at the Genealogical Proof Standard, you see it not only has to do with the concept of kinship, it has to do with the concept also of events and some other things. I'm basically an event guy, not really a kinship guy. But again, genealogy was simple. It would just be the name would be in the record and it would describe the relationship. But that isn't how it works. One of the most important things that differentiates a person doing genealogy from a genealogist is the concept of context. And that has a lot to do with evidence scope. Context is very important. And where do you find context? You find it in those things that don't really have people's names in them. One of the things that I'm going to be talking about soon in a video is types of courts. And knowing what kind of court it is helpful in your research, although it doesn't necessarily give you any more information than you need, but it creates context. It's just one of those things. You want to be sure that you understand that the scope of evidence is not just documents that contain names. They are documents that deal with history. They are documents that deal with the population of the history, migration patterns, for example, and the time period that you're dealing with. And then things like customs, the laws in place at the time. For example, what age does someone have to be before they become part of the militia, for example? Is it 18? Is it 21? Another concept would be knowing that you couldn't be an aviator if you were over a certain age in the military. Yet there were aviators above that age. Well, that meant they lied about their age. People lie about their age. How many World War II folk enlisted at the age of 16 with the forged parents' permission, saying they were 17? Or just came across a sailor who enlisted at 12. So again, know the laws and regulations, know that evidence scope, recognize the importance of context. There is some very good webinars out there on social history. That also is probably very important to your research. So this has been Craig. This has been Just Genealogy, and this has been Standard 40 Evidence Mining. Don't forget anything. Standard 41 Evidence Scope. Recognize that you've got to look at just about everything. And I will see you again soon.